Hi, this is Dan from DS Design Woodworking. Just want to take a few minutes to share a little bit of a review and some tips and tricks that might help with the jet oscillating drum sander and perhaps on some other drum sanders also. When I was looking for one, this particular machine caught my eye with the oscillating head because of the ability to give you a smoother finish. But when researching it, a lot of the negative information out there came down to problems with the paper on the drum overlapping and burning the wood. And in this roll here, if you can see a little bit of darkness here, this roll has been pushed over and overlapped, and it does want to happen naturally. Because of the rotational nature of the drum and the wrap of the paper wants to migrate down the drum. And with the oscillating feature, when you have pressure on the wood and it's pulling back, it wants to slide the paper even more. So this paper here, especially on this end, wants to work its way down over, and if you're not careful, it'll get on top of the next wrap, and then you're going to have an immediate burning in that spot because there's extra pressure there. So if you can see the way that I've got this paper installed, this is one of the primary ways that you can avoid this, is that the looseness happens on this end of the drum in my experience. The problem has all been down here. And so as I wrapped it, I kept it tight on this end, and as I get down here, I'm going to start to spread the gap. And that way, when this paper, these last couple of wraps here, want to try to move, they've got some room without causing a problem, some room to move. And the other thing I do, anything that's not as wide as the drum, I'm going to just use this part of the drum, primarily to sand. And that stays away from having issues down here. So that's one of about the only negative thing I saw on this sander and that I've experienced myself is problems with that paper wanting to move and get on top of itself, which you have to avoid at all costs, and you have to be watching. If it starts happening, you're going to have burning happening, and you want to get the head raised up to limit the amount of burning you get. One of the other things I've discovered in using the machine, and this might apply to, imagine all jet drum sanders and perhaps some other brands if they have a similar tensioning mechanism, is that the way that it tensions, the way that you would be told to do it isn't the best way to do it, basically. And to help explain it, I made a very crude sketch because I can't really show you in there while I work on it and have my fingers in there. So what we've got is the drum. The paper comes over and goes down through a pinch point, and right here's the primary hinge. And this lever here is what does the tensioning. It's spring-loaded, it pulls down. This lever here is also spring-loaded and hinged, and this is what creates the pinch on the paper. And what happens is that when you pull up on this lever, both of these will move up. And whether you do it with your finger or with the tool you can get from Jet, the tool hooks in out here and it pulls them both up. And you feed your paper in, and then as you let go, this lever does move first, but the tensioning part of it sags down a little bit as you're doing that. And so by the time the paper has been pinched, you don't have as much stroke left on this one as you could have to create the maximum tension. So the method I've used here to make it better is that pull up on this lever, feed the paper in as tight as possible, and then take a second finger and hold this lever up tight. Let the pinch part of it go, and then release the pull portion of it. So I think of it as a pinch and a pull. So you want to create the pinch first, and then you've got with this all the way up, you've got the maximum spring-loaded stroke in here to left there to create tension on the paper. That's not a big difference, but when you're talking maybe 20% more tension, it definitely makes a difference in the end result. So just to demonstrate it on the machine quickly, if I were to just pull up on the lever, you'll be able to see it. You won't be able to see it, but as I let it go before it gets to where it pinches, the pull portion of it is also sagging downward. So I'm going to make sure as I wrap the paper, I'm going to make sure it's tight as I wrap it. Also extremely important. You want to make sure that the end isn't curled under. If the end has a curl to it, you might miss the tensioner and go above it. So I'm going to pull both up, feed the paper down, and then before I let go, I've got a second finger holding the pull portion. I let the pinch go, and I let the pull go. And now I've got a nice tight wrap on the paper. And between the spacing of the paper and tensioning that way, I haven't had any issues for quite a while, knock on wood. That's may not completely alleviate it if you're taking heavy cut, but it's going to help a lot. The other tip, going on with what I just mentioned there, is not taking a heavy cut when you're oscillating. Even when you're not using the oscillating feature, if you're taking heavy cuts with a drum sander, you're probably using the wrong tool. It's not a thicknessing machine. A planer is what's proper for that. If you're finding you have to take really heavy cuts, then you should look at whether you cut your stock too thick to start with, or maybe a better method of doing that. Some things that are wider, this is wider than my planer, so I will change the thickness a little bit as I sand it, but I planned it just a little bit bigger than where I want it to end up, so that I'm not actually trying to take off significant material with the sander. This jet drum sander seems to be very heavily built, good quality. The oscillating feature maybe will add some wear down the road, we'll see. I haven't looked into maintenance as far as preventive maintenance for lubrication of the slides or anything, and that's one thing I need to check on. Maybe some wear in years to come, maybe some wear would create a little bit of movement or something there. But aside from that potential, the oscillating feature is really nice to have. It makes a very large difference in the finished product when you have that turned on or off. On this one, if you are doing just some more rougher sanding, you can turn it off just to save the wear on the machine, and you might be able to feed just a little bit faster. And then simply pulling this knob out or pushing it back in to re-engage. But it's noticeable when you have it turned on compared to off. I've had a little bit of issue on the first wide thing I put through here. Running a wide board through. With a typical sander, you can get a line on the outside of the sandpaper. And some of the machines, I think it might be Performax, or one of them has a lever you can flip that drops the outer edge a few thousandths to try to avoid that buildup in the middle. And that way when you flip the piece around, you're coming back and you're not creating seams down the middle. This, with the oscillation on, will create a zigzag line instead of a straight line, which I didn't notice on the first piece that I ran through it until I was finishing, which is a bad time to notice that. And I ended up not happy with it and sanding the entire thing down again to start over with the finishing. The way to avoid that on this one, that I found worked fairly well, was simply when running a wider board, to just keep a little pressure out here as you're feeding it through, and keep a steady amount and some pressure on it, which with some deflection in the belt or the table itself seems to have the same effect as that few thousandths of a drop that the other machine can give you. But definitely be aware of that, watching that outer edge. The open-ended style is nice for the potential to sand wide things, but you do have some issues in the middle that you have to be careful over. It takes a lot of hand sanding to get rid of. And if you do heavy hand sanding down one area, you may affect the flatness of the piece that you work so hard to achieve, and the reason you bought the big drum sander in the first place. Otherwise, the function of this one is similar to pretty much everything else I imagine. It's the only one I've owned, so I can't compare brands. I bought this secondhand, lightly used. I have had some issues with the SandSmart controller already, which is something I'm not happy about, but it doesn't really reflect on Jet, in my opinion, because that's a third-party thing that all the manufacturers use. I have another video I posted on what I found to get it working again if you have any issues with your own. And hopefully it'll continue to work. If not, I'll be looking at replacing the potentiometer here instead of the whole board is around $300, I think. But that hopefully will not cause me any more issues. It's caused me a couple of headaches already. As you go to use the machine and turn it on, nothing happens. So I've chased it down for now and cross my fingers that it keeps working. Just a couple of basic tips for drum sanding. When I'm starting out a piece, make sure that I'm not taking, you don't want to come in and have any kind of heavy cut. Make sure I'm high enough. And you can drop it and watch and see if the drum turns and things like that. Wait until it turns. I've already got there's feed rollers on both sides that tension to push down on the piece. And I'm hitting those pretty heavily, so I know I'm close. But what I like to do is on this first pass, I'm going to start the machine. And I'll fire it up real quick. And what I'm going to do is as I feed through, I'm going to find the wood. And then that will set the height for my first pass. Instead of working it back and forth and having the potential of maybe coming in with a heavier cut than I want. I'm just going to find it as I run it through. All right, reset there as my dust collector decided not to work for me. So as I run it through the first time, I'm going to find the wood. And now that's my starting height that I go back through and make an entire pass, because I made a partial pass as I came down. And that's a way to guarantee that you don't come in heavy on the first pass. This being end grain, I can flip it any which I want to, and I will continually rotate it to make sure I get the maximum flatness out of it. If he's had any kind of cup or anything, you can get rid of that by rotating, and it's not going to matter which way I run it, it's all the same. This has been sanded a few times through, and I don't know, give the camera a chance to try to pick it up, but this is 80 grit paper with the oscillation on, and whether or not you can see a focused view, or hopefully the scratches are pretty limited, especially compared to what you see if I ran it without the oscillation. That 1 inch of stroke makes a big difference. So if you're considering getting a drum sander, depends on what you're working on. With the stuff I've started building lately, I'm making a bunch of end grain chessboards, and I'm going to continue doing some things like that, where I've got large glue ups. I want all my trim as I make a base for it to be all end grain, so I've got probably 20 pieces glued together there. This is another portion that's going to make a base around the inside as I take slices off it and make a base for it. Things like this, it's worth its weight in gold. I wouldn't be building these if I was having hand sanded. So overall, I'm very happy to have this in my shop. And if you're considering it, I wouldn't shy away from this oscillating drum sander based on the reviews that you find. Just use those tips that I gave you, and I think you'll come out a lot better. You can also, I actually got some 16-inch paper for a 1632 that came with this one. This is a 2244, and that paper will actually fit on here and come out to the right spot to tension with about an inch gap in the paper, and then there's no chance of it overlapping. That's a possibility. Or I'm going to take one of these rolls and just try to cut some length off it and get it to come out right. So I'll have to do one rotation so that I can run a wider gap all the way along. And as I run out of paper from what came with the machine, I plan to buy it in bulk, and then I'm going to figure out a length and an angle that works so that my standard roll has a wider gap. And that will alleviate any concerns about the paper shifting and overlapping. So hopefully someone can make use of those tips. If you're out shopping, give this one a look if you want. I have nothing to gain, but I'm not trying to sell it to you. I'm happy with it. And the oscillation, until someone else comes out with it, I think is a real benefit. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.